It was one of those sticky summer afternoons where the air felt heavy enough to chew. I had just wrapped up a brutal week working shifts at the campus bookstore and helping a professor catalog dusty archives no one had touched in decades. My brain was fried, my limbs aching, and my only plan for the weekend was sleep, preferably somewhere with air conditioning and no one asking me to lift anything. So when my best friend, Mason, offered to let me crash at his place for the weekend, I didn't think twice. His family lived just a few blocks off campus in a big old house that always smelled like lemon polish and laundry detergent. There was something comforting about it. The faded paint, the creaky staircase, the always overstocked fridge. I had stayed over more times than I could count, and Mason's mom had long since stopped asking if I wanted anything to eat. She just handed me a plate and a smile. "You look like someone dropped a soul into a paper bag," Mason said, flopping onto the living room rug with a soda in hand. "I feel like a paper bag," I groaned, dragging my duffel inside. "A used one." He grinned. "Guest room's open. Couch is still the softest thing in the house." "Perfect," I muttered, already half asleep on my feet. "You're basically family now," he added. "You should just move in. My mom would love another son to force leftovers on." "Tempting," I yawned. "I'll think about it after a nap." The guest room was the quietest place in the house, tucked away behind the kitchen and usually reserved for relatives or Mason's dad when he had one of his marathon work calls. The couch in there had no right being that comfortable. It was old, sure, the fabric a little worn at the corners, but it practically molded to your shape when you lay down. The window beside it let in a narrow beam of light, just enough to turn the whole room golden. I kicked off my sneakers and collapsed onto it without even grabbing a blanket. My eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to the half-light. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear Mason's mom on the phone and the faint clink of dishes in the sink. The house buzzed softly with life, but it was muffled here, like the walls knew how to hush the world. I shifted onto my side and buried my face into the cushion. It smelled like clean laundry, fabric softener, and something else. Cologne, maybe. Sharp but smooth, cedar and something citrusy underneath. Not Mason's usual scent. Didn't matter. I let the warmth pull me under. My muscles sank deeper. I barely noticed when my breathing evened out or when the sun shifted position across the floor. Time slipped away. Minutes. Maybe an hour. I dreamed lightly. Flashes of water, someone laughing, a hand brushing my arm. I felt warm all over, cocooned in something I didn't want to leave. Then, something shifted. A weight, a subtle dip behind me. The couch was narrow, so it was impossible to ignore. Not crushing or crowding me, but definite. Solid. Steady. My eyes fluttered open, confused. And I realized, with a jolt of slow, blooming awareness. When I woke up, I wasn't alone anymore. At first, I thought I was still dreaming. That drowsy haze where the line between sleep and waking blurs. I was stuck there for a second too long. My body felt too warm, the room too still. Then I felt it. The unmistakable presence of someone else beside me. Not touching. Not close enough to call it cuddling or even an accident. But undeniably there. A second dip in the couch cushions. The weight of a second breath in the room. That slight shift in air pressure that only happens when someone's sharing your space. My eyes opened slowly, lashes brushing against the side of my arm as I blinked away the fog. And there he was, lying on his side, facing the ceiling like me. About a foot away was Mason's older brother, Caleb, the one who barely spoke, the one who was always heading out as we were heading in. The one who hovered in the background of family dinners but never really joined. I'd seen him maybe a dozen times in the 2 years Mason and I had been close, but we'd never shared more than a polite nod or a mumbled hey. And now here he was, shirt slightly wrinkled, one arm tucked under his head, the other resting loosely across his waist. His eyes were open too, blinking slowly, like maybe he was just waking up as well. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't say anything at first, just turned his head the tiniest bit and met my gaze. No panic, no apology, just calm acknowledgement. Like this wasn't the weirdest thing in the world. I, on the other hand, was panicking just a little. I croaked, voice still rough with sleep. Hey! His lips twitched, almost a smile. Hey! There was a pause. A long one. I sat up a little, propping myself on one elbow. Did I steal your nap spot or something? He shook his head, eyes flicking toward the ceiling again. Nah, I came in after. I blinked. And just laid down? Another pause. He glanced at me, then back at the ceiling. Didn't want to wake you. You looked dead. Oh, I swallowed. Right? Should have been awkward. And it kind of was. But not in the way I expected. Not like walking in on someone changing or saying something dumb in front of a crush. This was quieter. Slower. Like the air between us was holding its breath. He shifted slightly, the movement pulling the fabric of his t-shirt taut across his chest. I looked away quickly, then immediately cursed myself for making it weird. I didn't even hear you come in. I move quiet, he said, that almost smile tugging at the edge of his mouth again. I let out a soft laugh, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, you could have robbed me blind. His eyes landed on me again. I wouldn't. That threw me a little. The seriousness of it. The steadiness in his tone. Like he meant it in a way that extended beyond this moment. Like it was a rule he lived by. I know, I said a little too fast. I didn't mean it like, I know. He sat up then, slow and deliberate, arms stretching behind him in a quiet arch before he stood. Didn't mean to be weird. Just needed somewhere quiet. It's fine, I said quickly. Seriously. He nodded once, then ran a hand through his dark hair. Slightly messy now, like he had actually rested for a bit. Then he walked out without another word. Just like that, the door clicked softly shut behind him, and I was left sitting there, heart thudding in my chest like I just run a mile uphill. It was just Caleb, Mason's brother, the quiet one. The one I'd barely noticed, or maybe the one I'd tried not to notice. I laid back down, staring up at the ceiling, the scent of cedar still clinging to the pillow. My skin buzzed like it had been holding on to something that hadn't quite happened. And suddenly, this nap didn't feel like just a nap anymore. Caleb had always been kind of a ghost. Not in a spooky way. More like he existed a few inches outside of the rest of the world. Present but rarely participating. He moved through the house like background noise. Doors clicking shut gently behind him. Footsteps soft on the stairs. The occasional hum of a car engine when he came and went at odd hours. Mason didn't talk about him much. He's just private, he once said when I asked if Caleb ever hung out with them. Keeps to himself. Works weird hours. Kinda intense. But I noticed him. I think I always had. The first time I met him, I was helping Mason haul his drum kit into the garage for practice. Caleb had come out, shirt half-buttoned, coffee in hand. He didn't say anything, just leaned against the doorframe, watching for a second. I remember catching his eye briefly and feeling like I'd just been scanned and filed away in some mental drawer. A few weeks later, Mason had a stomach bug and I'd come over anyway to drop off some homework. Caleb opened the door that time. He didn't invite me in. Didn't smile, just nodded, took the papers and said, "He's asleep," then closed the door like the conversation was done. But the thing is, it never felt rude. He wasn't cold, just contained. Like everything he thought or felt happened under the surface, where most people didn't get to see. And I guess I never expected to be someone who would. Still, there were moments. Once, after a late-night party, Mason was too drunk to drive and I didn't have my license yet. Caleb showed up to pick us up. I climbed into the passenger seat beside him, unsure if I should say anything. We rode back in near silence, the stereo low, some instrumental jazz barely audible over the hum of the highway. "Thanks for coming," I finally said. Halfway through the ride, he just nodded. Then, after a pause, he added, "Mason's lucky to have someone like you." That stuck with me. Another time, I was sitting on the kitchen counter, eating peanut butter straight from the jar while Mason was upstairs yelling at his Xbox. Caleb walked in, grabbed a spoon, and joined me. No words. Just 2 spoons, 1 jar, and a weird kind of mutual understanding. I didn't read into any of it. Or maybe I didn't let myself. He was my best friend's older brother, a little intimidating, mostly a mystery, and definitely out of reach. But yesterday, lying on that couch, waking up to find him beside me, something shifted. The air between us had felt dense, charged in a way I didn't have words for. Not quite romantic, not exactly platonic. Somewhere in the quiet middle. It wasn't about touching. We hadn't even brushed shoulders. But the space he occupied, it was deliberate, like he'd chosen to be there next to me for a reason. And for the first time, I let myself wonder what that reason might be. Was it just about the quiet, the cool room, the soft couch, the excuse to rest? Or was there something else? Something he didn't say. Something I hadn't dared to think until now. I kept replaying the moment he looked at me. Not startled, not apologetic. Just present. Unbothered. Like he expected me to wake up and see him and he was okay with it. And why did that feel so intimate? Why did my skin still remember the weight of his presence even now, hours later? He'd barely said 10 words to me, and yet my mind wouldn't shut up. I stared at the ceiling in Mason's guest room, trying to convince myself I was imagining it all. But ghosts don't lay down beside you. Ghosts don't make your heart stutter. And Caleb? He didn't feel so ghost-like anymore. The house was quiet in that particular way only nighttime brings. Doors closed, televisions off, floors creaking softly under old wood and memory. Couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned for nearly an hour before giving up and dragging myself out of bed for a glass of water. The hallway was lit only by the moonlight sneaking in through the windows. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, expecting the usual silence. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, maybe the occasional creak of pipes. Instead, I found Caleb. He was standing by the counter in the dark, sipping something from a chipped ceramic mug. The soft light from the street outside caught the edge of his profile. Sharp jaw, relaxed shoulders, hair still slightly messy like he hadn't moved much since earlier. He looked at me without surprise, like he'd been expecting someone. Or maybe just me. Couldn't sleep? He asked quietly, voice low and even. Yeah, I said, reaching for a glass. The nap probably messed me up. He smiled faintly and took another sip of whatever was in his mug. Coffee, maybe, or tea. Knowing him, probably black coffee at midnight. Something bitter and grounding. I leaned against the opposite counter, unsure if I should say more. The silence between us didn't feel empty, though. It felt like a space we were both willing to sit in. After a moment, he spoke again. It's always quieter at night. Yeah, I said, matching his tone. I kind of like it. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was deciding whether to say something real or not. And then, with no warning, he did. I'm not great with people. I blinked. Okay. I mean, he went on, setting the mug down carefully. I can fake it when I have to. Work, family stuff. But it drains me. I always feel like I'm on stage. Like I have to guess the script and hope no one notices when I mess up. I stayed quiet, letting him keep going. He didn't sound bitter, just tired. Everyone thinks I've got it together, he said, arms crossing over his chest. Because I don't complain. Because I'm quiet. But the truth is, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just do things and hope they make sense later. Something in my chest shifted. A slow, soft ache I didn't know had been there. I get that, I said. I mean, not in the same way. But yeah, I spend a lot of time pretending I'm not completely lost. He laughed quietly, and it was the first real sound he'd made that didn't feel filtered or measured. We ended up sitting at the kitchen table, legs stretched out beneath it, the only light coming from the hallway. Time got weird. Minutes melted. Our voices stayed low, like the walls were listening. He told me about how he thought he'd be doing something different by now. That he went into his career out of obligation, not passion. That sometimes he wished he could just disappear for a few weeks and not have to explain it to anyone. I told him about the pressure I put on myself, to be impressive, to be easy to like, to always have a plan even when I had no clue where I was going. We didn't offer each other solutions, just understanding, like standing in the same rainstorm without trying to pull out umbrellas. There were pauses, but none of them were awkward. When my hand brushed his as I reached for my glass, he didn't pull away. His fingers stayed where they were, close enough that if I moved just a little, I'd be holding them. I didn't, but the thought hung in the space between us like fog. At one point, he stood and poured me a second glass of water without asking. I watched his hands, steady, careful, the kind of hands that rarely fumbled. When he handed it to me, our fingers touched again. Just a second, but it felt like more than nothing. Eventually, we both stood, the clock on the microwave blinking 2:13 a.m. He walked with me toward the guest room, barefoot like me, steps slow. At the doorway, he paused. "You sleep better with company?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, eyes dark in the low light, unreadable but open, and my heart skipped, not from fear, but from recognition. "I think," I said slowly, "I did last time." A beat passed. Then he nodded. He didn't follow me in. Not yet. Just turned back toward the kitchen while I stepped inside. But something had changed. This wasn't just about silence or insomnia anymore. Something was forming quietly, carefully between us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was imagining it. Couldn't sleep. Not from noise, the house was still as ever, but from memory. My body was wide awake in the quiet. Not with adrenaline, but with awareness. Of the way the couch dipped slightly beneath weight that wasn't mine. Of the hush of Caleb's breathing. Of how it felt to wake and know, without touching, that someone was near. It was like my body had held the shape of him. I shifted beneath the blanket, eyes open in the dark, ceiling barely visible in the pale wash of moonlight. I tried closing my eyes, breathing slow, counting backward, but none of it worked. The air in the room felt too still, like it was waiting for something. And then the door creaked, a soft, familiar sound. Hesitant, careful. I didn't move, but my heartbeat picked up, as if it knew before my mind did. The door opened slowly. A pause. Then footsteps, the deliberate kind, like someone unsure if they were welcome but hoping maybe they were. Caleb stepped into the room. He didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway for a second, his silhouette lit by the faint blue light from the hall. He looked at me, or maybe just at the couch, then quietly shut the door behind him. My chest tightened. He crossed the room without turning on the light. Same path, same pause beside the couch. Then he lay down. No excuses. No, just needed a quiet space this time. He just chose it. Chose me. We lay there in silence for a long moment. Not touching. Not even facing each other. But something had shifted. "You can't sleep either?" I whispered. "No," he murmured. "Me neither." Another pause. "It's stupid," he said softly, almost like he was speaking to the dark more than to me. "But I felt more rested yesterday than I have in months." I smiled, eyes still on the ceiling. "Yeah, me too." And just like that, we started talking. Not loudly, not fast. Just slow, quiet conversation that wandered where it wanted. We talked about childhood, the time he broke his arm trying to jump from the roof with a trash bag as a parachute. The time I got grounded for climbing onto my neighbor's shed to spy on a 4th of July party I wasn't invited to. He told me he used to hate thunderstorms as a kid, that the only thing that helped was sitting in a hallway closet with music playing through old wired headphones. I told him I used to fake being sick in school just to stay home and read in bed. He laughed softly at that. "You're such a nerd," says the guy who drinks black coffee at 2 a.m. like he's a film noir detective. "I never claimed not to be a nerd," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We talked about dreams, not just the asleep kind, but the what-ifs, the maybe somedays. He said he wanted to move somewhere smaller someday. Cabin, maybe. Quiet town, close to water. No deadlines. No expectations. I said I wanted to write something that made people feel the way music did, like they were being seen without needing to explain anything. "Sounds like you already know how to do that," he said. I turned my head toward him. I couldn't see much, just the faint outline of his face, his hair tousled and falling slightly over his brow. "You don't really know me," I said quietly. "I'm starting to," he replied, "and I think I like it." That silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy in the best way. And then his hand brushed against mine. It wasn't dramatic. No sharp gasp, no sudden pull. Just the soft edge of his fingers gliding over the back of mine. Testing. Wondering. I didn't move. Neither did he. We stayed there, skin barely touching. But that tiny bit of contact said everything neither of us had said out loud. And still, I didn't pull away. I woke to the smell of coffee. Not the bitter, burnt kind that sometimes lingered in college dorms or Mason's travel mugs, but something smoother, rich, familiar now. Caleb's. The other side of the couch was empty. The blanket had been folded neatly and draped over the back. I sat up slowly, muscles still tingling from sleep, head fuzzy in that way it gets after dreams that feel too close to memory. Had I dreamed it? The late-night conversation. His hand brushing mine. The quiet way we shared that space like it was always meant to be shared. I stood and wandered to the kitchen. The coffee pot was still half full, a clean mug sitting beside it, not mine. He'd left it for me. And just like that, the doubts began. What was last night? Just comfort? A lapse in judgment? Something he'd regret? Or was it real? I sipped the coffee slowly, staring out the window. The yard was bright with morning. Sun catching the dew on the grass. Wind stirring the branches just enough to make everything shimmer. The world looked peaceful. I didn't feel peaceful. I spent the rest of the day pretending to be normal. Watching TV with Mason. Helping his mom bring in groceries. Trying not to glance down the hall every time I passed Caleb's door. I didn't see him at all. It was like he'd vanished into the house again. Slipping back into the role of the ghost. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside to get air, or that was the excuse I gave Mason. The truth was I needed space. I needed to walk, to breathe, to think without the weight of every look and half-word pressing on me. I hadn't even reached the end of the driveway when I heard footsteps behind me. Going somewhere? Caleb's voice, quiet but certain. I turned. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, that same unreadable expression on his face. Only this time, something flickered in his eyes, like he wasn't sure what came next either. Just walking, I said. Needed to clear my head. He nodded once. Mind if I come? I shrugged. I don't think I'd say no. We walked side by side down the street, past sleepy houses and quiet porches. The sun was low, casting everything in amber. The world felt paused, like we were walking through a painting. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. Then, softly, like he was afraid of scaring the words, Caleb said, "Last night wasn't an accident." I looked at him. He kept his eyes ahead. I didn't plan it. I didn't think I'd even end up in that room. But once I was there, I didn't want to leave. The tightness in my chest loosened, just a little. I thought maybe I made it up, I said. Or that you'd regret it. I don't, he said quickly. Then slower. I'm not used to this. Letting people in. I usually avoid it before it gets complicated. I swallowed. And this feels complicated? No, he said. It feels different. We stopped at the edge of the neighborhood, near a small park where the trees bent low over the walking path. The kind of place where things felt smaller, quieter, more contained. He turned to face me fully. I've noticed you, he said. For a while now, even if I didn't say much. You'd come over, joke with Mason, fall asleep on our couch. You filled up space like it belonged to you. I smiled faintly. I didn't mean to. I didn't mind, he said. It made everything feel less empty. He stepped a little closer. I didn't let myself think much of it because, well, you're Mason's friend. And I didn't want to cross a line. I tilted my head. And now, I think the line crossed itself. We stood there in silence, dusk settling around us like a second skin. Then he reached out, slow, careful, like he was giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His hand touched mine first. Then his palm cupped my cheek, fingers feather-light like he was still making up his mind. And finally, his lips brushed against mine. The kiss was tentative. Not rushed, not desperate. Just warm. Real. like breathing in the dark and finding someone else there, exhaling in time with you. When he pulled back, I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, like he was waiting to see if I'd bolt, laugh, pretend it didn't happen. Instead, I smiled. Nobody saw that, I whispered. Good, he murmured. For now. We stood in the quiet for another moment, the world around us holding still. And for the first time in days, maybe longer, I didn't feel like I needed to figure anything out. Because this him, me, that kiss didn't feel like a question anymore. Felt like an answer. I didn't come over to fall in love. I came to escape, to rest, to take a nap on an old, too-soft couch in a house that had always felt safe. I came because Mason's house was familiar, and because I needed a break from everything else. I came with sore legs, a heavy brain, and no expectations beyond sleep. And yet, here I was. A few days had passed since that walk, since the kiss, since Caleb's hand touched mine like it had always known how. Nothing dramatic had happened since then. There were no sweeping gestures, no midnight confessions or whispered promises. But things had changed. It was in the way he looked at me now, longer, steadier, with a softness I hadn't noticed before. It was in the way he lingered when we were in the same room. The way his shoulder brushed mine when we passed in the hallway. The way he didn't avoid me anymore, didn't disappear into silence or shadow. And I didn't try to define it. There was no label for what we were. Not yet. But we both felt it. We didn't tell Mason. Not because we were hiding it exactly, but because it didn't feel like something to announce. Not yet. This was ours. Small, quiet, still forming. And that quiet? It wasn't absence. It was a language. Every time Caleb made an extra cup of coffee and left it by the sink for me. Every time he handed me the remote without a word and sat beside me with his knee brushing mine. Every time our fingers met under the table and neither of us moved away. That was how he spoke. He didn't say, I like you. He said, you can rest here. He didn't say, I missed you. He said, I saved you the last slice. And I started speaking back, bringing him a sweatshirt from the laundry when the temperature dropped, leaving a note on the fridge with a dumb joke he'd smirk at, sitting beside him even when we weren't talking, just so he knew I was there. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was real. And somehow, that made it louder than anything I'd ever known. One evening, Mason invited a few people over. Nothing major, just a backyard hang with cheap burgers and worse music. I helped set up the folding chairs and smiled when someone asked if I lived there now. Caleb didn't stay long. He made small talk for 20 minutes, then retreated inside. But later, when I ducked into the kitchen to grab more paper plates, I found a cup of water already poured, waiting for me on the counter. The ice hadn't melted yet. He knew I'd come looking. We didn't need a conversation. Later that night, after everyone had left and Mason was upstairs snoring like a chainsaw, I wandered back into the guest room. It was dim, the kind of soft darkness that invites sleep but leaves just enough space for thoughts to wander. I lay down on the couch, pulling the blanket over my legs, exhaling slowly. The door opened a few minutes later. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He crossed the room with that same deliberate stillness I'd come to recognize. Not hesitation, just intention. He eased onto the narrow couch beside me, shoulders brushing, knees curling in parallel. There was barely enough room for both of us, but neither of us minded. We lay there in silence, the kind of silence that said everything. His breathing slowed beside me. His body relaxed. The room felt warm, not from temperature, but from the nearness, from something unnamed and deeply known. And then, just like before, his hand found mine. Not searching, not asking, just finding. And this time, I didn't hesitate either. I didn't flinch or overthink or wonder what came next. I just held on. Because whatever this was, slow, quiet, imperfect, it was ours. And maybe I didn't come over to fall in love. But sometimes, the best things happen when you're just trying to rest. He didn't say much. He never does. But his hand found mine in the dark, and I held on. If the story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Sometimes love doesn't come with fireworks. Just a quiet presence, a shared silence, and a hand that finds yours in the dark. Share this with someone who believes in the slow kind of love, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're just trying to rest.